Welcome to Lesson 16 of the course, Cooperative Individualism, the Third Way to the Just Society. This lesson is titled, Where Individual and Societal Responsibilities Collide. We're constantly reminded by the reporting of the news just how frequently individuals exercise criminal behavior, criminal licenses against others. Social scientists continue to debate the extent to which these outbursts are a function of neglect or mistreatment during the individual's early years when nurturing by biological parents and by others help instill behavior and other values. If one accepts that by virtue of birth each individual's human rights are the proper subject of protection by society, then the system of positive law and institutions created must, by consensus, establish minimum standards for nurturing. Where the biological parents fail to meet this standard, government has the responsibility and should be given the authority to intervene by society. And yet, such a power contains serious opportunities for abuse, as we know. In legalistic terms, a child is by nature an incompetent party requiring parental and societal nurturing until such time as competency is demonstrated. At that point, what had amounted to a trustee responsibility by society is diminished. Competency entitles the individual to full benefits of citizenship, that is, freedom of action constrained by justice. The exercise of citizenship is the exercise of liberty. Actions that infringe on the liberty of others are by definition licenses. What has been most difficult for societies to resolve is to distinguish between liberty and license and to structure positive law accordingly. Of almost equal difficulty has been the question of how to deal with incompetencies voluntarily, or nearly so, brought on by the actions of an individual who was at one point in time fully competent, but has injured or killed another person while operating an automobile under the influence of drugs or alcohol, and that's just one example. As a society, we have yet to come to terms with these two major causes of voluntary incompetency: alcohol and drug abuse. The minimum level of societal involvement ought to center on the impact the behavior of these individuals has on others. An individual under the influence of alcohol or drugs is far more likely to act in ways that result in the exercise of a criminal license, from failure to provide appropriate nurturing to dependent children, physical and mental abuse of a spouse, and assault or worse against others. While addiction to alcohol and drugs is certainly an illness, the issue facing society is how to balance treatment of the individual with the responsibility to protect citizens from criminal license. Does society have the responsibility, and should government be given enough authority to act proactively when the risk of criminal license is high? Or must society wait until someone actually commits a criminal license as justification for isolating that individual from others? We already make these decisions every day, but the dynamics of our socio-political arrangements, our institutions, and our enforcement agencies provide neither liberty nor security. When society does a better job of protecting the human rights of our incompetent members and in creating a socio-political environment that secures equality of opportunity, we will experience fewer and fewer cases of criminal behavior occurring because of an individual's financial desperation or other antisocial attitudes fostered by an absence of positive nurturing and surroundings. At the same time, enforcement of just laws acts as a brake on the individual whose actions exceed the bounds of liberty. We will then have a much stronger and broadly felt sense of community. The issue receiving more public attention and debate than almost any other is what, if any, rights are possessed by the unborn. Is the life growing within the womb of a woman by nature part of that woman until the child is actually born? Or is the biological parent merely a host who, by virtue of pregnancy, acquires nurturing responsibilities to a human life in the process of formation? Modern technology has added a dimension by replicating the physical environment within which human life can be successfully developed. The biological mother is, in fact, no longer absolutely essential after the 6th month of life. Extremists on one side of the debate take the position that life begins when a sperm enters an egg and a zygote is formed. Extremists at the opposite end argue that life begins only after the fetus leaves the womb as a result of the natural birthing process. To satisfy the moral principles espoused by the first group, a woman must primarily be considered a biological host and only secondarily as a mother. This distinction is crucial in that if the first circumstance becomes the basis for positive law, then the decision of the woman to continue nurturing beyond delivery of the child must be voluntary. Society would have the primary responsibility for nurturing once birth has occurred. In the second instance, the decision of whether or not to accept the condition of pregnancy and the superior right and responsibility of nurturing would rest with the woman as biological mother. In either event, society retains both the obligation and authority to intervene on behalf of the child as an incompetent party. However, the responsibility to do so is immediate and primary when the woman is required, as biological host, to subordinate control of her body to the rights of the growing child. From the perspective of public policy, the most important responsibility of society is to instill sound moral values in young adults, who, as a group, demonstrate a strong desire to experience sexual fulfillment, but who do not yet possess the emotional maturity and economic means to provide positive nurturing to children. What must be said, however, is that this responsibility must accommodate a diversity of sentiment on the subject of sexual activity. Some individuals believe strongly that sexual activity outside the marital relationship is morally unacceptable. Others see sexuality as merely one aspect of our humanity that has no attachment to gender or formalized attachments. Here again, the interest of society is in the health and safety of citizens. And all schools, and specifically those receiving any form of public subsidy, ought to be required to provide education on the diseases that can result from certain patterns of sexual activity and what measures need to be taken for prevention. When schools are formed by educators with similar philosophies in mind, schools will advertise to parents that they attempt to instill particular values in the students, and parents will have the opportunity to choose which sexual curriculum and value system they wish their children to be exposed to. Safeguards in the form of minimum standards are appropriate and must be guided by the principle of protecting the most vulnerable of our citizens from physical or mental mistreatment. We've reached the end of lesson 16.